Thank you very much, Alberto, and thanks for Pierre for this introduction. I think one of the key objectives is that we are always looking for a common denominator for all the use cases, which is also a challenge to find appropriate designs and conceptual approaches which suits to most of the requirements, probably not to all of them. But Pierre described you a little bit the outside view with the overall ecosystem and the really necessary trust mechanism, crossover ecosystems, where I would like to scope a little bit more on the inner part of a federation, which is finally a certain use case who is targeting certain individual objectives and also the guiding principles behind it. So, and I think Pierre already outlined it. We are talking about data and mainly also how to achieve data sovereignty, which is definitely for the industry perspective very important. And this leads us to also all the discussions we have around this cloud edge continuum, because in most of the cases, data resides in the edge and they are collected in the edge, and how to orchestrate them, crossover provider, crossover cloud, edge, fog, whatever scenarios. And this has to be addressed accordingly, also with the term of data sovereignty, crossover these processing entities. And our key objective is to build a technical architecture for database services and business models. So to link the technical aspects with the use case aspect. And we are facing highly complex environments in terms of technology stacks, in terms of distribution of workloads, and so on and so forth. And in this sense, it is always a mix of functional and interoperable components, because interoperability is one of the key objectives as well. And therefore, we at least specified this set of federation services, or at least a conceptual approach of a federation with appropriate services, in conjunction with the regulatory framework and establishment of trust framework based on standards as Pierre outlined previously. And this is finally the scenario. So this is highly distributed, and Gaia-X should provide the road between all these edge entities and also the central processing capacities up to hyperscaler level within the various domains. And what is really important is that we don't build new silos in this sense. And we have this terms of individual use cases, but also data space is one of these new buzzwords, where we try to aggregate a set of data sets accordingly for certain domains, for certain use cases. And we are all aware that even such data spaces must be interoperable. So it doesn't make sense to have isolated data spaces, because this is really where we need to go to interlink them and to make best out of these data collections. And I need to outline Gaia-X is not a hyperscaler because it is really designed to orchestrate decentralized ecosystems for data infrastructures in a federated structure. And this is really where we are, what we are talking about with all the use cases in various domains like pharma. We have Catena-X as one of these lighthouse projects. Mobility is very important, construction, health, agriculture, and a bunch of more. And just to keep the relation to what Pierre showed, well, when we talk about these ecosystems, this is then one of these potential federations. I'm not saying that it is always equivalent, but at least one of these ecosystem styles can be something what I'm going to showcase as a so-called federation. And this means, from our point of view, a federation is a joint group of stakeholders to cooperate for business objectives. And this can be done by business, by domain, by production, by supply chain. This must be left open, of course. But what is really important, participants agree on joint rules, objectives, and technology. So this is one of the key requirements. Otherwise, we cannot serve for this term in terms of governance and interoperability, for example. And you need someone or something how to operate such a federation. This can be, for example, the role of a federator who is in charge to build or to provide all the services who are required to operationalize a federation. And these federators are typically assigned by the federation, because this is a joint agreement whom to, and this can be a multitude of federators. This is not just a single party. According to the different aspects of a federation, it can be served by a multitude of federators, of course. And we are promoting now GXFS as a so-called core services, and they are an optional reference implementation. This is just a tool set to kick off a federation, but in parallel within the Gaia-X Association, we are defining what are the minimum key requirements and technical agreements to keep federations interoperable. So this is something where we have two views: one, how to build a real operational federation, and what are the core requirements. And if anyone is capable to build it with his own means, then it's good to go. And really, we are promoting a kind of toolbox, which is based on open specifications. So I think we provide a maximum of transparency. Anyone can have a look and can comment on it. Everyone can see already what will be developed out of this reference implementation. We are referring to open standards. We don't want to establish new standards or something like this. It's really, we are taking those standards which are applicable to serve for the objectives. And as I said, it is a reference implementation, but there are a multitude of options to build a federation. So therefore we said it is more a kind of toolbox. And we have these core aspects. One of these are identity and trust. And it's quite obvious if we talk about trust corporate working on same objectives, you always need to know who is your opposite party. So we need full transparency on identities in the digital room and appropriate trust mechanism. And we made the decision, at least in this reference implementation, to use SSI as a conceptual approach to deal with decentralized identities. Then we need this federated catalog, which is kind of service overview of all those services which are used within the federation. I'm not talking about any global catalog or something. It is really a catalog which is in the scope of the federation. They decide what is in and what is out and what are the services, but also all the participants are described within this catalog so that you have full transparency about all the actors. And then we talk about sovereign data exchange. And this is not a replacement for data spaces. It's just a linking point to data spaces, because we are taking care about these technical questions, how to manage sovereign and secure data exchange between parties. Whereas data space by itself is an organizational concept, how to aggregate a multitude of data services, how to promote them, how to normalize the design of these data services in terms of ontologies, in terms of vocabulary, and so on and so forth. And then we have to always consider compliance questions around it. Even if we talk about non-personal data, there are requirements by regulation, for example, to be considered, which also creates some special compliance assessment criteria, let me say it this way. And just to showcase it, how they can interact, we also have a portal and integration approach. And this is then finally the first set we are promoting. In the identity part, we have this authentication authorization part, then organizational credential manager, where we are going to issue DIDs for participants, which is more on an enterprise level, and also some function to link to internal identity management systems and to collect those employees who are acting as principals in the Gaia-X world. And then personal credential manager. So both of them are more these wallet technologies, if you're aware about this. And we need additional trust services, which are then also going to be interlinked with the trust framework as Pierre outlined. And then some compliance things, federated catalog with the core catalog functions, or there's a typo, which is, we made the decision to use JSON LD, which is a serializable format. And it is really important when we talk about end-to-end service scenarios to interlink single services and to have a complete view, and to have also the option for a full assessment of such end-to-end orchestrations in terms of compliance assessment and security assessments and so on, which leads us then to the term of self-description, because this is one of the key elements in the Gaia-X functional implementation, that we have such self-descriptions, which are linked then with this model of claims and verifiable credentials, which is also a very huge advantage for the future, how to make appropriate assessment and the burden on individual assessment to reduce it. And then sovereign data exchange, where we start with contracting information and logging information. Yeah, I think there will be a lot of more further services in the future according to the requirements. All of them are, as I mentioned, based on open standards, mainly out of the W3C world. This is something where we provide further guidance in terms of how to implement federation services to be interoperable with other federations according to the Gaia-X approach. And there are some simple scenarios, like a participant who would like to describe via the federation services self-description tools, self-descriptions that can be the organization itself or services which are promoted by the organization. To some extent, we need someone who can approve it as a third party. It is not mandated, but this helps to some extent that someone made an appropriate assessment that at least the self-description is complete and according to the requirements. Then you will get a kind of verified self-description. And then you can bring this to the federator as a kind of onboarding approach. And then everything can be deposited in the catalog for all the community users who would like to have access to these information. So the steps are simply use as a participant, start with the self-description, you create a JSON LD file. This can be notarized or at least validated and signed. And then you have this JSON LD with a verifiable credential, and then you can hand over this set to a federation or to a multitude of federations to be onboarded. And we are talking about compute services as well as data services. And I think data services is much more important for the future to get this orchestrated and interlinked between all the parties. Yeah, our schedule, just to wrap up, in May 2021, we published the GXFS DE specifications. In June, November, we had a public EU-wide tender, and now we made the assignment for the code implementation. Coding is currently underway in Q1, Q2. And then next quarter, we are going to start with the second set of specifications with further extensions and to find alignment in these areas which were not yet clear during the first specification phase. And then the goal is to hand over everything to a community approach as an Eclipse Foundation project. So this is, we want to make it as open as possible. We have a set of informational assets on our website for GXFS. And now we are starting with the onboarding of the French project, because in France, they also started with the implementation of federation services. We just had the hackathon the last 2 days. Very interesting information and good presentations here. We will create some follow-ups in our blog. Yeah, and there's a full team, at least on my side, to support with all these activities. We are going to share these slides with Alberto, of course. And a lot of contact information. It's worth to have a look at the Gaia-X.eu main page, and then further GXFS pages. And there are a lot of documents which should be considered to get a better understanding about Gaia-X. And that's it from my side. Thank you very much.